Let's talk about what's happening here. I think let's revisit that first question that Scarlet brought up, which is an important one. From your experience in relationships with between these two countries, how did this sort of come to this point where a tariff just gets slapped on?
So let's just start with the fact that there is no country that is more important to the United States than Canada. And I mean that wholeheartedly because it is one of our largest trading partners. And by the way, the trade that we have with Canada is $635 billion in goods and services in 2016. It is balanced. In fact, the U.S. has a bit of a trade surplus with Canada right now. And so we have a very balanced trade. In addition to that, Canada is the largest energy supplier to the United States of energy that we don't produce ourselves. And by the way, we do not make enough energy within the United States to supply all of our energy needs. And Canada, both through in the oil sands and in hydro and solar and other ways, provides energy. We work together in NATO, in NORAD. We share this amazing 5,000 plus mile border. We have such an interconnected relationship, and I think that people need to understand the depth and breadth of the Canadian relationship before we start getting into these micro issues. Now, when you have a relationship that's this large, you're going to have differences at different times. And softwood lumber has been one that has existed over many decades, and we've been able to find solutions and resolutions to that. Unfortunately, and our team who worked on this during the last administration, I worked with it both in the Harper government and the Trudeau government, we were not able to resolve the softwood lumber situation such that the agreement expired. And this is a claim, just so everybody understands, this is a claim by industry that Commerce Department is executing upon. So this is an industry claim and very different in terms of the claims and the negotiations that take place than NAFTA, because this is outside of NAFTA. And I think they're conflating the two, which is unfortunate.
That's an important distinction to make here, that this is the industry's claim and it's not, and the government's just passing it along in effect. You had mentioned that these negotiations took place as your ambassador. You saw them unfold. What were the biggest sticking points? What was it that didn't allow for the U.S. and Canada to come to agreement on lumber?
I think that when we got together, I think our industry has a perspective in the United States that Canada should have a certain market share, and the Canadians were looking for other means to actually solve that problem. So we ended up having a gap between what the Canadians would like to see in terms of a solution and the industry. And the administration, the Obama administration, was effectively acting as a go-between, because what has to happen here is once an agreement is reached, that there has to be an agreement with the industry so that they don't sue. And so the industry has to come along on this. And so the U.S. industry feels very strongly that they felt that the Canadians had an unfair advantage during the last agreement, and they wanted to revise that.
What does this mean in terms of perhaps what we can read through about how Trump's administration is going to work with its peers across country border lines? Because, as we were just saying, it seemed like this was a meeting that, at least on the surface, went well, but then you have this coming right up and front and center. So how does this tell us, what does this tell us about the negotiation style or the priorities of the current administration?
So being very involved in the trade negotiations previously and watching what's unfolding here, there are two distinct approaches. One is that you can do trade negotiations behind closed doors around a table where two countries or multiple countries, as we did in TPP, can sit down and talk about desires, benefits, concerns, and the give and take of that set of negotiations. I would say trade negotiations are among the most complex that take place, not only in details, but the political ramifications. What's happening now is that the president and the White House are using communication and going public with what they consider to be irritants and things that they want to resolve before we actually even sit down and negotiate in the room across the table from each other, which makes it very challenging, I think, whether it's Canada or any other country when you do this, because one has to expect the prime minister or president of any country, when being poked at by another country, will defend themselves. And so you get in this, accusation on one side and a response on another side, and then you end up having to respond to the response. And it's unfortunate because I think it's a distraction from sitting down and working together. And I think that what we need to do with Canada in particular, up until recently was our largest trading partner, now number 2 to China. But we create millions of jobs in the United States as a result of our relationship with Canada. And 35 states, their number 1 export market, is Canada. So we are so closely tied together, supply chains work together. And yes, there are areas where we have differences. Canadians with us, we with them. But that's best for, I think, behind closed doors to sit down and roll up your sleeves and solve these issues.
You make a good case for that, but clearly that's not this administration's style. So if this is an opening gambit for negotiations out in public, we know that Canada has responded with a statement saying that it will vigorously defend its softwood lumber industry's interests, including through litigation. How do you think Canada will respond? Will it be through lawsuits?
I think that's going to be up to the Canadians to see how much they either desire to dial this up at this stage or appropriately respond without dialing it up too much, but making sure that the Canadians feel that their prime minister and government's best representing them in this type of environment. I think that, the United States can't count on anyone around the world more than we can count on historically our relationship with Canada at every level. And, we have ways in which we can work together with Canada. We've done it for several hundred years, and it's worked out to the benefit of our country. And I think that it's just a huge mistake to take your best friend and next door neighbor and start poking at him really hard. I don't think Americans would think about taking your best friend and start poking at him. Even if you have differences of opinion on something, that's when you take your best friend and you sit down and say, come on. We're new in this administration. We really have some issues. Let's sit down and work through them and find paths to success. And in my relationship working with the Canadians, I think they're very willing to try to find those paths to success. And I think that the new administration will find them very willing partners in much of this.